Brighton didn't just beat Newcastle, they completely nullified one of the Premier League's most dangerous new strikers. Today, I'm breaking down exactly how they did it. Welcome back to the Louis Selling YouTube channel. I hope you're all well. I hope your team won this weekend and picked up a big 3 points. In this video, I'll explain how Fabian Hürzeler's tactical setup allowed Brighton to control the game, shut down Nick Woltemade's influence and expose the spaces Newcastle left behind. I'll be looking at Brighton's defensive structure against Woltemade, how their build-up consistently bypassed Newcastle's press and their midfield, and why this win could tell us a lot about Brighton's evolution under Hürzeler. Let's jump straight over to the tactics board. So, Brighton started the game in their normal 4-2-4, 4-2-3-1 formation, but the system, the style, was a little bit different. Of course, Diego Gomez started on the left wing, but unfortunately he was taken off after about 35 minutes with an injury. Maxim de Cuyper came on, went into left back, and Ferdi Kadioglu pushed high into the left wing. And it was this change that made a big difference to Brighton, and Kadioglu was key, as you'll see later in Brighton's win. So we'll start with how they dealt with Nick Woltemade. We'll drag him across into here. He, if you don't know, Woltemade has scored 5 in 6 games for Newcastle. He's everything you want from a striker. He can hold the ball up, he can drop deep, link up the play, he's quick, and his finishing is exceptional. But Brighton dealt with him very, very well and restricted him to very, very little. Of course, he did score Newcastle's only goal in the game. It was an exceptional finish, a little flick, and it just highlights if you give him just that yard of space, just that little bit of time, not even that much time to be honest, he'll produce something spectacular. And when that goal went in, it looked like Newcastle were on top, were going to win the game. But Danny Welbeck stepped up and scored a massive goal in Brighton's season, and we'll highlight that goal in the media drawer a little bit later. But how Brighton dealt with Woltemade is, if the goalkeeper had the ball, Nick Pope, Woltemade would be high. He's a target man. He's trying to win the ball, link up the play, knock it off and create chances. One of Brighton's centre-backs would go very, very tight, literally almost holding Woltemade. Obviously, they can't hold him because it will be a foul, but they'd be as tight as possible. And the other one would shift across into the middle and just be prepared if anything came over the top. This is their zone here, dunk zone here. The fullbacks would be looking after the wingers. Weaver may tuck a little bit narrower just in case Minte would drop. Same with Cuyper, a little bit narrower. Kadioglu would drop because he is exceptional at defending. Of course, his normal position is a fullback. But if the ball was played to Woltemade's feet, he wouldn't be able to turn because Van Hecke would be really, really tight. And then Baleba and Ayari would also come into here and restrict his passing options back into the midfield. That worked very, very well for most of the game. Or, what happened more often, the ball would come over the top. Van Hecke would stop Woltemade from jumping. It would go over all of their heads to dunk. He would pick it up and start Brighton's counter-attack. And it's this transition that was crucial to Brighton picking up the 3 points. And also Newcastle's midfield, how they set up and how Brighton counteracted that was also very, very important. So let's put the ball back here and we'll show you now how Brighton bypassed Newcastle's midfield so brilliantly. So Newcastle set up with a flat midfield three of Tonali, of Joe Linton and of course Bruno Guimaraes. And then a normal back four, Trippier, Botman, Tior, who is exceptional by the way, Tior, and Dan Burn at left back. Minte's pace against Dan Burn was dangerous all game. But the way Newcastle set up with their midfield leaves a massive, massive gap, which if done properly, you can exploit. And that's what Brighton did. If you watch my Barnsley video about Zone 14, you'll know that Brighton like to overload these narrow areas. Minte would stay wide on this occasion, but Ayari would come into these pockets as well. Baleba also. And if I get the rectangle tool, you can see how much space Brighton would have in between Newcastle's back four and their midfield. Van Hecke, there's an example in a minute, gets the ball high. Weaver would also be in this area on many, many occasions. And he slits the ball straight through to Ruter. Welbeck makes a run through the middle. He gets the ball, Rüter drives so well with it, slots a brilliant ball through to Danny Welbeck, who takes his time, composes himself, chip over Nick Pope and into the bottom corner to make it 1-0. And that happened on so many occasions. And I think that might be a problem for Newcastle this season going forward. I understand they like to play over flat three, but even if just Tonali had dropped a little bit deeper, it would have stopped Brighton from getting in behind on so many occasions. But that is how Brighton dealt with Woltemade, a little bit on how they bypassed their midfield. It worked, and we're going to jump over now to the media drawer to show you some in-game examples of how Brighton did this so well. So we'll start here with an early chance for Brighton for Jorginho Rüter. And what we're highlighting here is the press from Brighton. If you look, you've got the centre-back, you've got the DM, you've got Ayari, the midfielder here, and the left winger Gomez up here. Brighton have so many players forward, pressing Newcastle back, forcing them back. And in terms of creating a chance, it paid off so well. Jorginho Rüter in here, the 10, has gone high to almost act like a traditional 4-4-2 front two with Danny Welbeck to create that space. Look at the gap they have in here. In case Newcastle mess up the pass, which they do, Joe Linton's pass finds the feet of Danny Welbeck. And just look how much space Brighton have. Look how many players they have forward just from that press. If you go here, Welbeck, Rüter, Baleba, Van Hecke, Ayari, Diego Gomez. They have all this space in here to make something happen. And they've got all this space out wide for the likes of Gomez or Ayari to make a run forward into these spaces here. And even Baleba could make an overlap here. And Minte as well, if possible, could make a dart through that gap in there. That does not happen. Rüter does a little bit too much on the ball to try and get a shot away. But if we flick on to this next image, he gets it back. And it's at zone 14 again. Here, once again, he should lay the ball off to Ayari or Gomez here to make that run and get a shot off. As I said, he tries a little bit too much. He does get a shot off himself, which is well saved by Nick Pope in the end. But you just look how many bodies Brighton have in that area of the pitch. They're going to create chances. They're going to get shots off. And eventually, they're going to find a goal. And this is what they do. And it was just brilliantly worked from Brighton. They played a little bit deeper in terms of they usually have a high press. They like players really far forward. But in this situation here, they've bypassed Newcastle's midfield. Cuyper, the right back, Rüter, the 10, Kadioglu, the left winger, and Cuyper, the left back, almost playing as a left winger here. Danny Welbeck is occupying the centre backs. Van Hecke has to find that pass in there. He does. And that's what I was saying about Newcastle's flat midfield three. None of them drop, which means Van Hecke can play this lovely pass in behind Jorginho Rüter. He turns and Brighton are away. It has to be a good pass and it has to be a good touch. But that's exactly what it is. Rüter receives it. He turns and look, he's now got a back four to run at with 4 or 5 options supporting him. Minte is also down out here. You can't quite see him. But from here, the space, Rüter has so many options. He can pass to Kadioglu. He can pass to Cuyper. He can try a slip ball through to Danny Welbeck. Or he can switch it outright to Maxim de Cuyper, who can make that run and get a ball in the box. The option he goes with is slotting through Danny Welbeck. It has to be a good pass. He turns, he makes that run. And look, again, there's so many options. It's an exceptional pass. Danny Welbeck, he slips him through. And from there, Danny Welbeck's never missing. Chips Nick Pope, and it's 1-0 to Brighton. Another angle here. Just look how much space. As I said, Minte as well always stays wide. Cuyper, a natural midfielder playing as a right back, has that licence to come into the midfield and be that extra option. And for Brighton's winning goal, Cuyper is key, and this positioning from him is crucial to scoring that goal, as is Yassine Ayari. But now, another situation here where it can sometimes go right, sometimes go wrong. This is in the second half. Minte uses his pace here to get past Dan Burn. He can dart in the box. The only issue here from being deep and trying to get in between the back line and the midfield spaces is they have a lot of players deep. Danny Welbeck, Jorginho Rüter, Ferdy Kadioglu and Yassine Ayari, they're all making that dart in the box. They all want to score. Newcastle defenders can't pick up their man, otherwise they'll leave so much space in behind. Minte does a little bit too much, I suppose. His final ball wasn't the best yesterday, but when it comes, he's an exceptional player. Once again, look at this space in here that Brighton have opened up, just from being slightly deeper. All this space in here. And if Minte gets the ball right, they're going to get shots away. And in this situation, they do get a shot away, but it's not quite how you'd expect it to happen. Minte crosses the ball across to the back post. It gets to Ferdy. Kadioglu, Newcastle's backline, is so deep in this situation now because they've had to follow Minte. And because Brighton attackers started so deep, it means that Yari can come in, be that extra man on the edge of the box. Kadioglu here has a few options. Can he try and shoot into this bottom corner? Difficult chance if he does. Or can he lay it off to Welbeck to get a shot away? Again, he does lay it off to Welbeck. Doesn't happen. Welbeck also has the option of laying it back to Yasin Ayari, who in Brighton's win was absolutely key and he's been a standout this season. Welbeck receives the ball, lays it off to Ayari. Look how much time, look how much space he has to try and whip this ball into the top corner. It's unlucky from Ayari. He puts it just wide. But that's another example of how Brighton sitting deep, slightly deeper, and having their men going forward and having that space between the midfield and the back line creates chances just like this. Another example here of Brighton's press. You must be thinking, well, where is the midfield? Well, they're here and here. Ayari and Baleba, they hunt as a pack, they go as a pack. Baleba wins the ball back from Yasin Ayari, and they go on an attack here. A player I want to highlight again is Ferdy Kadioglu. He's the left winger. He's narrow, occupying that midfield space. If Brighton lose the ball, he's there to cover Baleba and Ayari, but he also has that ability now to make that run in behind or out wide and get in the box and potentially score a goal. Ruta here, Minte here, going forward, bursting forward. Rute causing issues for Tonali. He's not entirely sure where he is. He has to track back. And then the ball, another situation here with Kadioglu. There's so many pictures here of Kadioglu. As I said, he was so important. Here, picks the ball up, tries to put a ball into the box. It is well defended by Newcastle. And all Brighton were missing yesterday, just that little bit of final delivery, that finishing touch, that run. Rutter doesn't quite time it right to get in that space in this situation. But if he does, it's probably going to end in a goal, as not many goalkeepers are saving a shot from that distance. Danny Welbeck again is sitting deep if that ball gets cut back. And Baleba on the edge of the box, the DM. Maxim to Cuyper, the left back here. And in this situation, this is who I want to highlight. Kadioglu and de Cuyper were so good yesterday on that balanced left-hand side. And to be honest, I don't see Matoma getting straight back into starting 11 when he comes back, because these two were just exceptional. The ball's defended by Newcastle. As I said, it's cleared, but Van Hecke is high. De Cuyper's high. Two defenders there to win the ball back and create that overload so Brighton can keep that attack ticking over. So many players squeezed into that middle of the pitch. And then, because Brighton were high, Maxim de Cuyper was high. He gets back a little bit, but he assesses the danger and he sees that pass from Trippier. He intercepts it, and now look at how many options he has. He can play the ball into Jorginho Ruta. He can play the ball into Kadioglu. He can knock it off to Van Hecke. He can play a switch over to Minte. He can try a very difficult ball into the feet of Danny Welbeck. Or here, he can try a ball in behind. He has, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 options here, just from Brighton's press and having extra players in that middle of the pitch. He decides to make a run forward. Look at how many options Brighton have again. They have players forwards. Not as many as the previous screenshot, but there's not any players in the box. Again, it's that zone 14. Kadioglu wide. The ball gets laid off to Kadioglu. Puts another ball into the box. You can see Welbeck making that run. Doesn't quite time it to get on the end of it, but it's a fantastic ball from Kadioglu. The ball is cleared by Newcastle. Not too well. It comes back to Maxim de Cuyper, and because he was so high, he can get that shot away. It's well saved by Pope, but on another day, it could have gone into the bottom corner, or he could have tried to knock it into the top corner. It's just so good from Brighton, having an overload, having these players in particular spaces, picking up, not the half spaces, picking up spaces you wouldn't expect certain players in certain positions to be in. For example, in this situation, is your left back usually there? Probably not. Is your number 10 here? Probably your right winger in space if the ball gets knocked out. Now, another situation here, Yasin Ayari in his normal position where he should be. The ball is played forward could go to him, it could go to the left winger, Kadioglu. Look how narrow he is once again. And him being narrow is so important to this win. I'll keep saying it because it's how Brighton won the game. The ball gets played into Kadioglu. They bypass Newcastle's midfield again. This is the right back. On the next screenshot, you'll see he has a ball in behind to the left back, Maxim de Cuyper. He could also play it off to a Yari if he wanted. Or if he was looking this way, Danny Welbeck is deep to make that run and pick up the ball. The ball gets played to Maxim de Cuyper, and look at all the space he has. Not many players high at this point, but look at the players running forward to get into that attack. Yari, Kadioglu following his pass, Danny Welbeck, Minte, Jorginho Ruta. Newcastle players, the back line, don't know what's coming. They don't know how to defend it because by the time they've arrived, they've had to go deep because if they don't, Maxim de Cuyper has a free run. Here, the ball is sublime from de Cuyper. Only one player in the box. It's really hard to pick Ruta out, but it's fantastic. He doesn't quite get the flick off. It would have been a fantastic goal, very similar to Woltemade's, but if he got it in, it would have been a fantastic goal. But again, de Cuyper had the option here of passing back to Kadioglu. Danny Welbeck, if he was a little bit further forward, could have got on the back for that. And again, what am I highlighting? The space, those narrow zones of zone 14 and how crucial they were to Brighton's win. Another clip here, Maxim de Cuyper. So many options with how high Brighton were. This player here is the centre-back, Van Hecke. Kadioglu dropping into that midfield position again. He could play the ball back here to keep the attack ticking over, keep the ball. Could try and play it back to Van Hecke. But Brighton and de Cuyper and Yari are so ambitious with their forward passes. They're very good technically on the ball. The ball gets played in to Yasin Yari, one touch, and he's in behind that Newcastle back line because, again, he's bypassed this Newcastle midfield here. Look at the three. Look how many players are beyond that midfield three. Miley's come on now to replace Joe Linton. Van Hecke's beyond him. Ayara's beyond him. Ruta's beyond him. And Danny Welbeck is pretty much in line with them. And Minte, of course, is high as usual. Yari doesn't quite get the shot away. He has a few options here. This is a really dangerous situation. He could try and get a shot here, which he should. Maybe the near post to try and catch Pope out. He does try and play a ball back to Ruta, which is a good option, but it is well cleared by Newcastle once again. And you can just see Brighton should have had so many more goals and killed the game off so much earlier. Now, another situation here. Brighton with the ball deep. This is James Milner. This is the midfielder. I said Brighton played deep, but they also played a system, a game where they had the ball, they could be on the ball, they could play them passes, keep possession. The possession was about 45%, but that also meant Brighton being deep. They could play that counter-attacking football, which I've highlighted in so many of these screenshots, and how good it was against this Newcastle team, where they could get in behind, get in the spaces. The ball here finds Lewis Dunk. They've progressed up the pitch. Dunk has Yasin Yari here. He has Milner here, and he has Maxim de Cuyper down here. The ball could go either way. Kadioglu's narrow to make that run to get out wide to create the space for himself, or Maxim de Cuyper. Dunk decides to play the little pass inside to Yasin Yari because, again, look how much space he has in here. The Newcastle midfield three has dropped slightly deeper to cover those gaps, even though Brighton have so many players still in there. They wasn't sure whether they were coming or going. The ball gets played into a Yari. You can see, he can see the whole of the pitch. He can go anywhere. He has 6-7 options. The ball gets played into him. And the one pass you wouldn't expect him to make if you flick back to this screenshot is the pass to Mats Wiefer. If you remember back to a few minutes ago in one of the first screenshots I showed, Mats Wiefer, the right back, a natural midfielder, makes that dart forward into this space here. It has to be an exceptional pass from Yasin Yari to find the space here. But again, he has the option of Welbeck here. He has the option of Simas here. He could even try and play a ball in behind if he really wanted to. He has that technical ability to do so. The ball is incredible. It finds Mats Wiefer, who's bypassed the Newcastle midfield once again. And once the ball gets to him, he has so many options. A pass to Minte, a pass to Simas, and a pass to Danny Welbeck. Yari, as I said, was exceptional with his passing. Wiefer, now look at this situation. Brighton have so many players, again, steaming forwards. Wiefer, the right back in this situation, playing like Jorginho Ruta was earlier as the number 10. How high he was. He has a few options here. He could try and slot Simas in the middle, who when he came on was very good. gave Newcastle something else to think about, a striker that's going to make those darts in behind, be that high player. Danny Welbeck had dropped to the 10 at this point, and his position here is also very, very important. He's deep, he's not making that run into the box, which means if something happens, he can pick up the ball. Weaver tries a shot or even a pass to Minte. It's a brilliant tackle from Dan Burn. Simas has made this run in behind, as I said, which means Botman and Tior have to go with him. Trippier is here out of the game because he's trying to keep track of Kadioglu. Welbeck has that smart idea, that intelligence, just to stay on the edge of the box in case something happens. The ball comes to him on the edge of the box, and it's an exceptional finish into the bottom corner. It looks easy. He makes it look easy. It's 2-1 to Brighton, and it is just absolutely brilliant. So that is how Brighton used their overload in those tight spaces to get in the gaps between Newcastle's backline and midfield to win the game 2-1. And it was just fantastic from the Seagulls. As you've just seen, Brighton's win over Newcastle wasn't just about the scoreline. It was a tactical statement from Fabian Hürzeler, and he showed how his side can adapt. They can control the game, they can play a counter-attacking style, they can keep the ball in situations, they can play with intensity, and they can punish you. And if some of the players had that final ball, just that little bit of finishing touch, then it would have been a much bigger scoreline. But it showed how Hürzeler can adapt, how Brighton control a game and neutralise a physical threat like Woltemade without really losing their identity. But if you enjoyed this tactical breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Did Brighton's setup surprise you, or is this just another example of their tactical evolution under Fabian Hürzeler? Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week for another analysis. You know the outro by now. Do it with me. Adios.